Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Okay, so this one's genuinely wild, and I wanted to get it out to you as soon as we had enough details to actually talk about it properly. We're talking about the Porsche 911 Vantage SUV concept, and yeah, you heard that right. Porsche might be taking its most sacred nameplate, the 911, and putting it on an SUV. If you're new here, welcome. We cover every major reveal and concept in the performance and luxury space, so if that's your thing, go ahead and hit subscribe, because there's a lot more where this came from. Let's talk about why this is such a big deal. The 911 is basically the most protected nameplate in the entire automotive industry. It's been a rear-engine sports car since 1963, and Porsche has been famously conservative about touching that formula, even as they've built out the Cayenne, the Macan, and the Taycan around it. So the idea of taking the actual 911 name and putting it on an SUV is a genuinely massive departure from everything Porsche has stood for. Now, Porsche already has SUVs, obviously. The Cayenne's been around for decades, and it basically saved the company financially back in the early 2000s. But this is different. This isn't a new SUV nameplate. This is Porsche potentially attaching their most iconic sports car name to a body style it's never touched. That's the story here. Let's get into what we're expecting design-wise. Think about the 911's signature silhouette, that sloping roofline, the rounded headlights, the wide rear haunches. Now imagine that stretched and raised into something with genuine SUV proportions. Expect Porsche to lean hard into keeping those classic 911 visual cues. The round headlights are almost certainly staying. That's too iconic to lose. And I'd expect the rear to keep some version of that light bar that's become a hallmark of every modern 911. Where it'll differ, obviously, is ground clearance and overall height. This needs to actually function as an SUV. So expect a considerably taller stance than any 911 in history, paired with wider fenders to accommodate a wider track for stability. Porsche's design language has always been about evolution rather than revolution, so even in this radically different body style, I'd expect it to still be instantly recognizable as a 911 the second you see it. Inside, expect Porsche to bring their driver-focused cockpit approach that's defined every 911 interior but scaled up. Think a more upright seating position for better visibility, obviously. But the wraparound dash design and that low-slung feel Porsche's known for should carry over as much as physically possible. Given this is a concept, expect some genuinely futuristic touches too, maybe a fully digital cockpit, ambient lighting that responds to drive mode, that kind of concept car flourish that doesn't always make it to production, but signals design direction. Now for the part everyone's really here for, what's actually powering this thing? Given the 911 badge, Porsche is not going to put anything underwhelming under the hood here. Expect this to draw from Porsche's flat-six heritage in some form, likely paired with hybrid or full electric assist given where Porsche's overall lineup is heading. Horsepower figures for concept vehicles like this tend to be aspirational rather than locked in, but given Porsche's recent Cayenne Turbo E-Hybrid was already pushing past 700 horsepower, I wouldn't be shocked if a 911 badged SUV pushed well past that to justify wearing the name. Performance numbers matter enormously here, because if this thing doesn't drive like a 911, if it doesn't deliver that razor-sharp steering feel and genuine sports car dynamics despite the higher ride height, Porsche is going to get absolutely destroyed by purists. So expect a huge amount of engineering effort specifically around handling, active aerodynamics, and weight distribution to try to preserve that 911 driving character in a body style that fights against everything the 911 has traditionally stood for. Let's talk comparison for a second. Against something like the Cayenne, which is Porsche's existing flagship SUV, the 911 Vantage concept would presumably sit as an even more performance-focused, more expensive option above it, similar to how the 911 itself sits above vehicles like the Cayman and Boxster in Porsche's lineup hierarchy. Against outside rivals, you're looking at things like the Lamborghini Urus and Aston Martin DBX, vehicles that already tried to bring supercar dynamics into an SUV body, so Porsche wouldn't exactly be pioneering the concept. But doing it under the 911 name specifically would be a much bigger statement than anything those rivals have done. As for release timing, remember this is described as a concept. which in the auto industry can mean anything from close to production ready to purely a design exercise that never sees a showroom. Porsche has a track record of eventually productionalizing concepts that generate enough buzz, so if the reaction to this is strong, don't be shocked if a toned-down production version eventually follows, probably under a different name if Porsche gets cold feet about actually badging it a 911. So here's the real question. Does the 911 name even belong on an SUV, or is this Porsche testing the waters on something that ultimately launches under a completely different nameplate once the internal debate plays out? Honestly, I think the engineering challenge alone here is fascinating. Trying to make something with SUV proportions actually feel like a 901 to drive is an enormous ask, even for a company with Porsche's resources. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Is this the boldest move Porsche's ever made? Or is this the kind of badge stretching that eventually dilutes what made the 911 special in the first place? And if this does become real, would you actually buy a 911 SUV, or does that feel like a step too far? If you're into these kinds of breakdowns, make sure you're subscribed, because we're going to be covering this story closely as more details come out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.